Mika, as we set up this week, and it's going to be a very important week, not only in the history of the Trump administration, but of this country. Think about how telling it is that after 2 weeks of damning testimony, day after day, and after Republicans are given a week to prepare, an additional week after those 2 weeks to prepare for the president's defense, they were left yesterday parroting Russian propaganda points about Ukraine interfering in the 2016 election. And Mika, this is what's so damning. Those Russian propaganda talking points have already been knocked down and discredited by the United States' 17 intel agencies. And the United States Senate got a briefing from the intel community to tell them specifically that what Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana said yesterday on Meet the Press was not only a lie, but that it was active Russian propaganda, and had warned the senators that the Russians had been pushing this propaganda line for years. So I just think it's important after, again, if you haven't been paying much attention over the past week because of the holidays, it's important to understand you saw two really moving, important weeks of testimony. And now the Republicans are coming back. They still have no defense. And they're actually reduced now to doing nothing but repeating Russian propaganda points. And as somebody said yesterday, if they do that, knowing that 17 intel agencies told them it was a lie, and being warned in the United States Senate, then actually they're not ignorant. They've actually turned themselves into being Russian assets. That's where we are as a nation as this week begins.
And as Joe said, this will be a consequential week in the impeachment probe of President Trump for that reason alone. But also today, the House Intelligence Committee will review a draft of the impeachment report, which will make the case for the removal of the president. Tomorrow, the committee will vote to send the report to the House Judiciary Committee. Then on Wednesday, the House Judiciary Committee will hold its first impeachment hearing. The Judiciary Committee had invited President Trump or a White House lawyer to attend the hearing, but the White House informed Democrats yesterday it will not participate. In a 5-page letter to House Judiciary Chairman Jerry Nadler, White House counsel Pat Cipollone wrote in part this: "Under the current circumstances, we will not intend to participate in your Wednesday hearing," adding, "We cannot fairly be expected to participate in a hearing while the witnesses are yet to be named, and while it remains unclear whether the Judiciary Committee will afford the president a fair process through additional hearings." And while this new week of impeachment proceedings kicks off, the president will leave for the annual NATO summit today. The president tweeted on Saturday, "I will be representing our country in London at NATO, while the Democrats are holding the most ridiculous impeachment hearings in history. Read the transcripts. Nothing was done or said wrong. The radical left is undercutting our country." Hearings scheduled on same dates as NATO. While the House Intelligence Committee readies its impeachment report, Republicans' defense of the president, as Joe mentioned, continued to get more creative. Here is the top Republican on the Judiciary Committee, Congressman Doug Collins of Georgia, and Republican Judiciary Committee member Tom McClintock of California yesterday, defending President Trump in his dealings with Ukraine.
If you believed that the president had used the power of his office to try to get Ukraine to interfere with our elections, if you believe that, would that be an impeachable offense?
I do not believe it, so that I'm not going to answer a hypothetical in which is designed to simply say that the president did something improper. Chris, he did nothing improper. There was nothing about a problematic giving aid to another country in which you're talking about corruption, which he's required to do by law. And it just so happened that a presidential candidate's son, who was getting a massive amount of money from a company that had been under investigation, in which even other witnesses that have been favorable, quote, to the Democrats in the investigation, have said needed to be looked at. This is a problem of overall proportion, but there's nothing here that the president did wrong. And this is the thing that we're going to move forward on.
When you defend the president and think about these hearings, Is there anything in your mind that the president did involving Ukraine that is wrong or that concerns you in any way?
Well, he didn't use the delicate language of diplomacy in that conversation. That's true. He also doesn't use the smarmy talk of politicians. What you hear from Donald J. Trump is the blunt talk of a Manhattan businessman. He says what he means what he says. That's the only thing that's remarkable about that conversation. But he was entirely within his constitutional authority and was following the statute that Congress adopted in granting aid to the Ukraine.
No, actually, that's just not the case at all.
And he means
he's
what he
lying.
says.
No, the whole thing, he's lying. The DOD had already said that it was that they were good with the aid. They passed the aid. The DOD, State Department both said they passed guidelines regarding corruption. What he just said was a lie, and saying that that is normal sends such an unbelievably dangerous signal, not only to politicians that are running for office this year, but those who may run in the future. But you listen to both of those comments, Jonathan Lemire, and I feel like Ralphie in A Christmas Story. I need an Ovaltine decoder ring to figure out what the hell Collins and McClintock said, because you have a president who clearly says, I'll tell you what, here's the deal. Congress has given you guys almost $400 million in military aid, defensive military aid. You've been invaded by Putin, but I'm not going to give it to you until you do a press conference that actually trashes my domestic rival, my domestic opponent. I mean, it's clear. It's straightforward. We have testimony, and actually over the past week, more news has come forward that actually shows it's even worse than what Sondland told us. There wasn't a second call. We'll get to that later. A lot to get to here. But, Jonathan Lemire, it seems that after 3 weeks, Republicans have nothing to defend the president with other than word salad and Russian talking points. Help me. Tell me if I'm wrong.
Joe, you're right. That is what you've seen.
Happy birthday, Jonathan.
That is what we have seen, is that the Republicans have been unable to defend the president on the facts. So therefore, they've had to come up with convoluted explanations. You just heard a couple of them. You had the conspiracy theory from Senator Kennedy pushing that it was Ukraine and not Russia who interfered with the 2016 election, even though, of course, every U.S. intelligence agency, everyone, says that it was Russia. And you have a president himself who is now refusing to cooperate in the probe. And let's not skip over this. So what we've seen here is the White House counsel in that letter last night said that the White House would not participate. The president himself or a lawyer won't be there on Wednesday. They did leave the door open for perhaps future cooperation down the road in the proceedings. But what they're going to do is what they have done throughout the second part of the Mueller probe, and certainly from day one since Democrats took control of the House of Representatives with their own investigations and throughout this Ukraine matter. They're simply going to stonewall. They're not going to play ball. They're going to not cooperate. They're going to try to have the split screen image of the president overseas trying to conduct the people's business. His campaign likes the idea of him being on the road a lot in the weeks ahead, showing him that he is governing while the Democrats, in their views, are put back home playing politics and pursuing this impeachment matter. They're going to really try to up the stagecraft these next couple of days while he is in London, suggesting that he is the commander-in-chief.
But Jonathan, let's segregate this between what Donald Trump is doing, which, of course, Donald Trump is Donald Trump. He has proven he puts his interest above that of the country, of that of the world. I mean, he comes first. We know that. Baked into the cake. Donald Trump doesn't give a damn about what America looks like 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Baked into the cake. But what about these Republicans? These so-called conservatives, people who stood by me as we fought against Russian influence and the spread of communism and fought for balance, fought for all of for conservative values. We were told that to be conservative was to be a guardian, to be a conservator, right? And yet you have Republicans going on national television repeating Putin talking points. And again, I'm not saying this. The 17 intel agencies have said this. And the United States Senate even got a warning from the intel agencies, Donald Trump's intel agencies, that this is propaganda that Vladimir Putin has been trying to push for the past several years. We know Donald Trump. We know with Donald Trump that all roads lead to Moscow. All roads lead to Putin. We know that. History will show that. I can say that this morning, completely comfortable. Play this tape back 10 years from now. I am right, and anybody defending Donald Trump will be wrong on this point. The question is, why is the Republican Party, why are conservatives who claim to be against Russian expansionism and authoritarianism, why are they willingly repeating Russian talking points made up by an ex-KGB officer? Why, Jonathan?
These Republicans, these conservatives have betrayed their values to defend the president. It's not the Republican Party anymore. For most in the GOP, it's the Trump Party. And they're willing to go along with what he says. They're taking their cues from the White House. You know who agrees with you? Yeah. Vladimir Putin. He said in the last 10 days that he thinks that he's glad that the U.S. now is talking about Ukraine in election interference and not Russian. We heard this congressman do it during the hearings when Fiona Hill spoke, when she tried to knock down these conspiracy theories, these lies. They are carrying their water. They're carrying the president's water and Vladimir Putin's water. And the president's going to keep going on with it because to this point, anyway, there have been no defections. And that's why they're playing this game with impeachment. They're not going to cooperate because they feel like they haven't lost any Republicans, and therefore he'll be able to stay in office.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.